Thank you for joining me at FutureMoneyTrends.com. I'm here with John Rubino. He is an expert on the dollar. You have to subscribe to his commentary at dollarcollapse.com. It's a must. He's also an author, and he does a lot of shows, and his analysis is something that is he's able to take something complex and explain it to the average person who doesn't, have time to completely, thoroughly research everything about the economy. And he'll give you an accurate update on what's going on and what you need to know. John, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, sure, Daniel. Thanks for having me on.
Well, John, I had hoped to talk to you about gas prices and oil prices today. And I want to kind of start off with something that happened to me last night. Last night, I have a Yukon GM. It's kind of like a Suburban. I came out of the movies, went into the mall parking lot, and my vehicle had been damaged. Somebody had punctured the fuel tank, and about 25 gallons spilt on the ground, and they stole about 3 gallons. So we're talking about, about $12 to do all that damage just to get my gas. Which leads me into my question: is $4 gas for the U.S.? Are we approaching the breaking point between what Americans can afford to pay? And then the follow-up question to that is, will demand destruction bring that price right back down?
Well, I don't think anybody really knows what the exact breaking point is as far as oil prices and gas prices go. But whenever they rise, it's like a tax increase. It sucks money out of the pockets of people who would otherwise spend that cash on something else. So on the one hand, it's inflationary because it forces prices up across the board, and on the other hand, it's deflationary because it sucks purchasing power away from other sectors of the economy. So, and that money flows to other countries primarily, who many of whom are not our friends. So, geopolitically, it's bad news when oil prices go up, and economically, it's generally bad news when they go up. So it's a bad thing pretty much across the board. And whether $4 a gallon gas or $5 is the breaking point that tips us into a recession, I don't know. But the higher it goes, the harder it is for the economy to grow in a balanced way. And we're pretty close to the record high average gas price in the U.S. right now for this time of the year, because normally it goes up from here as the driving season really kicks in. And so since we're coming from a high base right now, it's possible that we see $5 a gallon gas during the summer, which would be a problem for a lot of people. It makes commuting harder, and it makes traveling less interesting, and so it generally hurts the economy.
Now, do you see Americans altering in the future? And we're talking now, the next 5 to 10 years. Do you see the way people work and go to work? I mean, are we going to have to alter our lives? I mean, is this inevitable that fuel is going to be rising?
I don't think it's inevitable. There are so many technologies and so many new energy sources out there that it's possible that we muddle along with prices at this level for quite a while, and then clean energy sources, alternative energy sources kick in and start pushing the price of energy down. That's possible. On the other hand, we could have some kind of a geopolitical thing where, Israel bombs Iran like everyone's talking about them doing, and that would send the price of oil to $200 a barrel and gas to $10 a gallon, and we'd have a full-fledged energy crisis here. And both of those scenarios are reasonably possible, so I have no idea. And I think that the key thing to understand about energy is that it's not really necessary to the financial crisis scenario out there. Even if oil was $10 a barrel, we would still be borrowing too much money, and we would still be building up way too much debt in the U.S., and we would still be forced to monetize that debt, by printing and otherwise creating huge numbers of new dollars. And so we'd still be heading off a financial cliff. And so energy is a contributing factor. If we have, if peak oil is real and energy prices are going to go up from here, that's a headwind. That makes it harder and harder for us to get our house in order. But it looks like we're doing nothing to get our financial house in order in any event. So we are a doomed society on our current course, and it looks like we're not altering the course in any way. So it looks like we've got a gigantic crisis out there in the not too distant future, regardless of what happens with the energy markets.
Now, going to the gold market, speaking of a doom society, and of course you're the host of the owner of dollarcollapse.com. When looking at gold, I've seen some arguments recently that we're going to get some type of confiscation through taxation. Do you look at that as a risk, or is just buying gold worth the risk?
It's a very real possibility. Historically, governments, once they're deep into a financial crisis of their own making, start to do really crazy confiscatory things. Capital controls of various kinds are imposed, and wealth taxes, and all kinds of confiscations of wealth. Inflation itself is a tax on savers. And so we're going to see all kinds of things like that, and it's very possible that in that mix is some kind of windfall profit tax on owners of gold, because if the financial trends as they are now in place continue, that's very bad for the paper currencies of the world and very good for precious metals. So you're liable to see gold go way up, and that creates the holders, or that turns the holders of gold bullion into targets for a government which is desperate for more revenue. So yeah, it's completely possible that we see some kind of a tax on gold sales, so that if you sell your Krugerrands or Gold Eagles, the government's going to want 50% of the proceeds, something like that. And what that would do is eliminate the profit in buying gold now and hold down the price in the short run, which is good for the dollar, because gold is kind of the reciprocal of the dollar. When it's going up, that means the dollar is going down. So, we could easily see something like that, which means you've got to diversify. You want to own some gold mining shares and store some gold bullion overseas that's beyond the reach of the IRS, and have some gold in your house somewhere in a safe place that you can get to, and that maybe you can sell and not report it. Because I don't think that, I would never counsel anyone to break the law when it comes to taxable sales of assets. But we're getting to the point where the laws are going to be very unjust if they come out and try to confiscate gold from people who are just trying to protect their assets from an out of control government. So I think then you have to make your own judgment about how you want to deal with that. But there are ways to diversify beyond the reach of the IRS, and we should be thinking about those things now.
Yeah, when it comes to civil disobedience, lawful civil disobedience, peaceful civil disobedience, you have the situation where we're not even in a major crisis as far as you can still go to the mall and still go to the movies today if you want to go to, but yet the president has recently signed a bill where we can now be arrested without having an attorney, without having a trial. I've seen laws. Senator Rand Paul was talking, I think this was about a year ago now, that about storing too much food, being a food hoarder. When it's so rough for people, because I tell you my own example. It's I have a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. Is that what it's going to take? Is it going to just finally take some people with the George Washington and Thomas Jefferson type mentalities with some civil disobedience to change things? Is it possible to change things through civil disobedience in this environment?
I don't know. When the government goes out of control, all bets are off, because normal kinds of political discourse get pushed off to the side in the drive for survival. And we're heading for one of those periods, very possibly. In past historical crises have usually brought political crises along with them, and sometimes big wars and things like that. So it's completely possible, based on the numbers, the amount of debt that we're building up, that we are heading into a time when our ideas of democracy and freedom are really compromised. And you see signs of that all around. As you said, we're passing laws that are turning us, on the one hand, into a police state, where the government has the right to track your library books and to pick you up without a search warrant and just lock you up on the suspicion that you are in some way involved with terrorism, which is just such a broad idea, that basically gives them the power to take any dissident and disappear them now. And coming from the left, you've got the government taking the power to force us to buy things. In this case, health insurance. But if that stands up to the Supreme Court, it is declared constitutional this week in the case that's being tried there now, then that basically opens the floodgates. The government can force us to buy anything it wants to, and so from both the right and the left, our old ideas of personal freedom and individual rights are being compromised. And as it gains momentum, because we haven't even really hit the serious crisis part of the financial side of things. And when that comes, we have already created a government that's almost potentially a dictatorship. And it won't be hard for a future government under the kinds of strain it's going to be under if we have a financial crisis to just basically declare martial law and turn itself into a real, in effect, dictatorship. And so we're headed for something like that. And then how you deal with that as a citizen is hard to know, because basic civil disobedience doesn't do you all that much good unless it's really, really widespread when you've got a government that's taking this much power to itself. So I think all you can do is become as self-sufficient as possible and to diversify your finances as much as possible and to educate yourself politically. In other words, we should become experts on the Constitution and the original founding principles of the U.S. So when we have a chance to argue in favor of individual liberty and sound money and limited government, that we're able to do it articulately. Because the really interesting, useful argument is coming. When the systems that are in place now start to implode, then there's a chance to rebuild something along the lines of the original Constitution, if we do it right. Probably libertarian and classical liberal and constitutional type voices are going to be in the minority, but there's still a chance that side wins the coming argument. And we should be ready to participate in that conversation when the time comes.
Do you think that time might be coming in the next 4 years?
Oh, I have no idea about timing. I'm wrong every time I try to predict anything with, for instance, by investing in a short-term change in the stock market, something like that. I'm always wrong. So frequently, financial bubbles, which is really the catalyst for all the stuff we're talking about, can go on a lot longer than a reasonable analyst looking at just the numbers might think that it is possible. And so this one, which is now kind of a paper money bubble or a government debt bubble or something like that, or the dollar bubble if you want to give it a specific currency name, it's gone on longer than seemed reasonable back when James Turk and I wrote The Coming Collapse of the Dollar in 2004. We expected the system to start to implode within a few years, and it's held on. And so it's possible that this goes on for a fair bit longer, but it's also possible that it falls apart tomorrow morning. You never know when you're going to wake up and find out that derivatives in Asia or Europe freaked out, and the U.S. stock market can't even open. Something like that is also very possible.
Now,
So
let me ask you something on this is, I know you're not a mind reader, but on just your opinion on Bernanke. Do you think Bernanke actually believes he can keep this thing afloat, or is he just now going for a controlled crash landing?
I have no idea. It's hard to understand what the people in charge are thinking, because it seems like the fact that we're heading off a cliff is so obvious just based on the numbers. I mean, as debt builds up to absolutely unprecedented levels and derivatives cross the quadrillion-dollar total line, it seems like it's obvious that a gigantic, very unpredictable crisis is coming, and yet the guys in charge seem to be pulling their levers, same as always, and expecting a result that they would have gotten back when debt was 1/4 what it is now. As Jim Rickard says, they think they're turning a thermostat, but what they're really working with now is a nuclear reactor.
Yeah.
And when it goes critical, it becomes completely unpredictable. You can't just turn a dial and dial it back in a linear way. It becomes nonlinear. And that seems to be what we're heading for. And so when when somebody from the Fed or Treasury goes on TV and says everything's fine, we just need to tweak this or change that, and we'll be okay. It doesn't make any sense to me. So it's hard to understand what they're thinking. Either they're blatantly lying, or they're so clueless that they don't understand the basics of the business that they're in. And I don't know which of those is scarier.
I'm so glad you're thinking the same thing, because I often, even though I look at the two parties as one big government party, I often just go, I just politically, why didn't Obama let the thing collapse when he took the inauguration? Because then they would have all been blamed on, somebody else, and then you could have done whatever you needed to do that you wanted to do. But instead, they really tried to keep this drowning man up another few years. It blows me away.
Yeah, it's hard to explain, hard to understand, because it does seem obvious that this system is not salvageable as it is, just because we owe too much money. Nothing mystical, magical, or even ideological about this. The numbers just don't work. It's like if a regular family woke up with an extra $1 million in credit card debt all of a sudden. Their lives would change in really unpleasant ways. And countries, in that sense, are no different than individuals or families. If you borrow too much money, things change. You lose control of your life, and that's clearly where the U.S. is right now, and also Japan and the Eurozone. Debt levels are just at unprecedented levels, and the numbers don't work anymore. If you look at, for instance, tax revenues for sovereign debt versus the cost of servicing the debt that's out there. If interest rates rise to historically normal levels, that's all it would take. Just a return to 1980s, 1990s level of interest rates on Treasury bonds for the U.S. to be bankrupt, and for Europe and for Japan. And that's not something we can forestall for much longer, I think.
Now, John, in closing, I know you said you're not a market timer, but as far as predictions go, as far as what your feel is, because you go through a lot of news and not a lot of analysis, you're well educated. What is your analysis, and kind of just sticking your thumb in the air on what do you think about? Are we going to have a conflict with Iran in the next 12 months, and are we going to see an official announcement of another round of quantitative easing?
Well, take your second question. I think some kind of quantitative easing is going to be permanent. I mean, the numbers don't work without massive stimulus. And so we will have to keep monetizing our debt going forward as long as we can. And that comes down to the dollar. We can keep this game going in the U.S. as long as the rest of the world wants dollars. And as soon as the rest of the world figures out that we're creating way, way, way too many dollars for the current value of the currency, and heads for the exits and refuses to take dollars. Well, once that happens, everything falls apart. But until that time, we can keep the game going. So, yeah, we'll see more quantitative easing, and yes, it will work until it doesn't work. And about Iran, I have no idea. It sounds like Israel is very, very serious about not allowing Iran to get nuclear weapons with delivery systems that can reach Tel Aviv. And it sounds like the U.S. is trying to delay that inevitability and failing to do it. So, it's very possible that some kind of conflict comes in the not-too-distant future. But I have no idea what's being said behind closed doors and what the plans are. Everybody's moving as if they think it's going to happen in the near term.
Yeah. Well, John, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us and share your analysis. If someone would like to reach out to you or just wants to keep up to date with what you're watching, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, I run dollarcollapse.com, which is a site that tracks a lot of what we've been talking about here. So the idea is, show up for an hour in the morning, and you're pretty much up to speed with the latest happenings in the global financial crisis.
Absolutely. Dollarcollapse.com is a must for everybody. Thanks so much again for your time. You have a great day.
Sure thing, Daniel. Thanks.